Welcome back to another episode of Train for Life Fitness Podcast. Today, we are strapping in for a deep dive that I think cuts through maybe the biggest source of confusion in the gym.
Oh, for sure.
The fundamental difference between training for maximal strength and training for pure muscle size or, hypertrophy.
Right.
We've been through a whole stack of sources on this, everything from physiology papers to applied sports science articles, and they all kind of point to the same thing. While these two goals seem similar, the signals you're sending your body they're totally distinct.
They're almost opposites in some ways.
Exactly. At first glance, you think, I lift heavy, I get stronger, I get bigger, and yeah, that happens.
To a point, yeah.
But if you really want to maximize one specific outcome, if you want to tailor your workout for laser-focused efficiency, you absolutely have to understand the mechanics underneath. And that's our mission today.
That's the core challenge, isn't it? The sources are clear that we're dealing with two primary adaptations. Goal one is about getting stronger. It's about maximizing your force production, being able to move a heavier load than you could before.
The raw output.
Yeah. And goal two is about maximizing cell growth, building bigger muscle fibers. Everything we're going to talk about is dedicated to dissecting how your training has to change based on which one of those you prioritize, the output or the aesthetic. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. Let's start with the classic pursuit. Pure strength.
Yeah.
When we define strength, we're not just talking about the muscle itself. The sources make it so clear that this is a neurological game, first and foremost.
It really is.
So what defines this path?
Yeah.
And why is the nervous system so heavily emphasized in the research?
Well, the defining trait of strength training is the focus on boosting the efficiency of that communication highway between your brain and your muscles. You're essentially training motor unit recruitment.
Okay, break that down for us. Motor unit recruitment.
Think of it this way. Your muscle might have the raw potential to lift, say, 100 pounds. But if your nervous system can only fire 70% of the necessary motor units at the same time, you're only going to lift 70 pounds.
So you're leaving strength on the table.
A lot of it. Strength training is about teaching that neural system to fire every available unit and to do it quickly, all at once. It's about improving coordination and what's called rate coding.
So if hypertrophy is the muscle fiber saying, I need to get bigger, strength training is more like the brain saying, I need to get better at commanding the resources I already have.
That is a perfect way to put it, yes. And that means the workout structure has to be all about maximizing those neural outputs.
Which is why the reps and sets look so different.
Precisely. That's why we see a structure geared toward intensity, not just volume. We're talking very low repetition ranges, typically 1 to 6 reps per set.
Just a few reps.
Yeah, using weights that are approaching 85% to even 100% of your 1 rep max. The goal is simple. Lift the heaviest possible weight you can manage with perfect form, and you'll usually do that across 3 to 5 sets.
And what about rest? This is a big one. The mandated long rest periods, 2, sometimes 3 minutes. That can feel like you're just standing around.
It feels like downtime, yeah, but they are. They're non-negotiable for this kind of adaptation.
Why is that?
The energy system you use for these near maximal lifts is the anaerobic lactic system, the ATP creatine phosphate system. It's incredibly explosive, but it runs out of gas really, really fast.
Okay.
It takes about 2 to 3 minutes for those creatine phosphate stores to fully replenish so you can generate that same maximum force again if you only rest for 60 seconds.
You're not fully recharged.
Not even close. You're inherently limiting the weight you can lift on that next set, and suddenly you're not training for maximal strength anymore. You're training for something else, like muscular endurance.
That distinction is so key. If your next set isn't heavy enough to demand that, 85% of your max neural output, the training signal just gets diluted.
Exactly. And that intensity requirement leads us right to exercise selection. The sources are overwhelming on this. They prioritize the big compound movements.
Squats, deadlifts, overhead presses, bench presses.
The classics, the big rocks.
So why there almost exclusive reliance on those? I mean, couldn't I increase my deadlift by just doing a ton of hamstring curls?
Well, accessory work has its place, of course, but these compound lifts are king because they engage the entire kinetic chain. They recruit the most muscle mass all at once.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's essential for lifting genuinely heavy loads. And more than that, you're optimizing what's called intermuscular coordination. You're training the synergy between your quads, your glutes, your core, all during a squat. The goal is unified, systemic movement under stress.
Which directly translates to lifting more weight.
It's the only way to do it. And that brings us to progression, the strategy for getting stronger. We all hear the term progressive overload, but for strength training, it's a very clean, simple metric.
How so?
It's the most focused form of progression there is. You are strictly and gradually increasing the external load. You're adding weight to the bar.
That's it?
That's pretty much it. If you successfully hit 5 sets of 3 reps with a certain weight, the next week, your main goal is to make that weight just a tiny bit heavier.
So we've got the method. Low reps, heavy weight, long rest, compound lifts. Let's talk application. Why should a non-competitive lifter dedicate time to this? You mentioned functional strength, but I know a lot of people are thinking, doesn't just getting bigger muscles make daily life easier too?
That's a great question because, yeah, size does help, but strength defines capability. Functional strength, as the sources define it, is your ability to generate meaningful, coordinated power in dynamic, unpredictable, real-world situations.
Like catching a falling box or...
Yeah, exactly. Or moving a heavy piece of furniture quickly and safely. Strength training makes you powerful and, maybe more importantly, injury resilient. It improves your bone density and connective tissue stiffness way more effectively than moderate weight training does.
So it's a foundation for longevity.
A profound foundation. It sounds like strength is really the necessary baseline for almost all other physical goals.
Okay, so let's pivot. Let's address the other half of this equation. We're moving from training the neural command center, the brain, to training the muscle fibers themselves. Let's talk hypertrophy, the path to actually building bigger muscles.
The whole adaptation signal just shifts completely. We are now focusing on maximizing the cellular stress that leads to muscle growth. It's about increasing the physical size of the muscle.
So we're not aiming for the maximum weight lifted anymore.
Nope. We're aiming for maximum localized fatigue.
The classic explanation is that growth comes from these small tears in the muscle that repair and grow back bigger.
Yeah.
But let's go a little deeper than that. What are the primary mechanisms of hypertrophy that the sources really detail?
We're basically chasing 3 distinct signals. First, and maybe most important, is mechanical tension. That's just lifting a heavy enough weight for a significant amount of time.
Okay, time under tension.
Right. Second is metabolic stress. That's the pump or the burn you feel. It's the buildup of metabolites, like lactate, in the muscle cell, which triggers cell swelling. And then third, you have muscle damage, which are those micro tears that kick off the repair process.
And that combination is the trigger.
That combination of signals triggers what are called anabolic pathways, most notably the mTOR pathway, which is kind of like the muscle's construction foreman telling the cell, all right, it's time to build.
It's biology using repair to create growth, but driven by this really complex interplay of forces, which explains why the training mechanics are so different from strength work.
Absolutely. We trade that maximal intensity for high volume and sustained tension. Hypertrophy needs a much higher rep count. We're typically talking 10 to 15 reps per set, sometimes even higher.
With moderate weights.
With moderate weights, yeah. Weights that let you get to that rep count but still feel really challenging and close to failure. And you'll usually do, 3 or 4 sets per exercise.
And that takes us to the rest periods, which are, they're dramatically shorter compared to strength training. If strength needed full recovery, why does hypertrophy intentionally cut that recovery short?
Because for hypertrophy, we are intentionally sabotaging full recovery.
To what end?
To maximize that metabolic stress we talked about. We're talking 30 to 90 seconds between sets. This short rest period keeps all those metabolites trapped in the muscle cell. It maximizes the pump, and that cell swelling is actually a powerful anabolic trigger on its own.
You want the muscle to feel like it's constantly under load.
Constantly working. And the choice of exercises also becomes a lot more liberal, a lot more strategic. Strength relied on coordinating those big movements. What does hypertrophy training bring into the mix?
Isolation exercises.
Exactly. It's a sophisticated mix of compound and isolation work. Compound movements, like a bench press, are still super important because they let you handle enough weight to create that mechanical tension.
But then you add in things like cable flies or leg extensions.
Right, which are used specifically to target individual muscles and ensure you're getting maximum aesthetic development and, symmetry. It lets you bring up lagging muscle groups and just maximize the total volume you're directing to one specific area.
So if strength progression was all about adding plates to the bar, how do you track and execute progression for hypertrophy? It seems a little more fuzzy.
It's a broader metric for sure. Progression in hypertrophy is about increasing the overall volume of the workout over time. You might be stronger, but instead of adding 5 pounds to the bar, you might add 2 more reps to your set.
Or another set.
Or add an extra set to the exercise, or maybe slightly increase the weight while staying strictly within that 10 to 15 rep range. The goal is always just to apply a greater stimulus than you did the week before.
What's fascinating here is we start to see these secondary benefits crop up beyond just the obvious getting physically bigger muscles, better definition. We get a major increase in a different kind of functional quality.
That's right. And that benefit is improved muscle endurance.
How does that work?
Because you're subjecting your muscles to such high volume and short rest periods, you're forcing something called mitochondrial biogenesis. You're literally creating more cellular power plants.
So your muscles get better at sustaining effort.
Significantly better. You won't tire as quickly when you're doing repetitive tasks or, in certain kinds of sports.
So we have these two really distinct philosophies. They're almost opposing in their training signals. Strength training says rest completely, lift maximally. Hypertrophy says limit rest, lift moderately, maximize total stress.
Yep.
Now, here's the practical reality. Most listeners want both. They want the functional strength and they want the muscle size. Can we actually pursue both at the same time without just diluting the signal?
And you've just hit on the core dilemma of advanced training. If you try to do, say, 5-rep squats and then 12-rep bicep curls in the same exact training phase, the risk is you just muddle the signal.
Your body doesn't know what to adapt to.
It doesn't know what the priority is. The sources suggest that trying to maximally recover for a strength set while also trying to generate metabolic fatigue for a hypertrophy set it's just counterproductive.
So the answer isn't to combine them simultaneously in one workout, but to separate them strategically. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources all point toward the concept of periodization.
Exactly. Systematically structuring your training cycles over time. This lets you leverage the gains you make in one phase to actually enhance the next one. Periodization models are the blueprint for this.
Okay, let's dig into that synergy. If I start with the strength phase, say 4 weeks of heavy, 3 sets of 5, what have I gained that then helps my next hypertrophy phase?
What you've gained is superior motor unit recruitment efficiency. Your nervous system is just better at its job. So when you switch to that hypertrophy phase and start lifting for 10-15 reps,
I can use a heavier weight for those reps.
you can now lift a heavier moderate weight than you could have before that strength phase. And a heavier moderate weight means greater mechanical tension during your hypertrophy sets, which is the #1 driver of muscle growth. The muscle gets bigger because you can stress it more effectively.
And what about the other way around? What does the hypertrophy phase, all that volume and size, do to support my return to maximal strength training?
The hypertrophy phase gives you a larger cross-sectional area of the muscle fiber. You've literally built a bigger, more resilient engine.
A bigger foundation.
A bigger foundation.
Right.
When you go back to a strength phase, that increased size provides a greater structural capacity for force production. You have a physically larger base upon which to apply that maximal neural command.
That makes the whole process sound so much more sophisticated than just showing up and lifting. The source material mentioned a couple of ways to periodize this. What's the most straightforward way for someone listening to start?
The simplest, most researched method is probably block periodization. You dedicate a whole block of time, say 4 to 6 weeks, entirely to one goal.
So a hypertrophy block, then a strength block.
Exactly. 6 weeks of a hypertrophy block, focusing on high volume and short rest. Then you immediately transition into a 4-week strength block, focusing purely on those 1 to 6 rep ranges and full recovery. You intentionally prioritize one adaptation before you switch your focus.
And are there more advanced options for someone who wants to kind of maintain a mix of goals all year round?
There are. The sources also talk about daily undulating periodization, or DUP. It's more complex, but it's also more flexible. You might lift heavy for strength on a Monday.
Then volume on Wednesday.
Right. Moderate volume for size on Wednesday, and then maybe light, high volume for endurance or recovery on Friday. It lets you stimulate both adaptations weekly, so you don't have to wait 6 weeks to train for size again, but it requires really careful monitoring to make sure you're recovering enough.
The key takeaway in both of these scenarios seems to be intention. You have to be intentional about what signal you are sending your body on any given day or during any given month.
Absolutely. The mistake most casual gym goers make is just mixing the signals. They do a heavy set of 5 reps, get tired, and then do a light set of 12 reps on the same exercise later. That just sends a confused message. The systematic use of periodization is what turns all that effort into truly comprehensive results.
And that leads to the final provocative thought I want to leave with you, our listener, to sort of mull over.
Yeah.
We've established that combining these phases gets synergistic results. But the highest level of mastery here involves thinking about fatigue management. Since maximal strength training taxes the central nervous system so heavily, and hypertrophy taxes localized muscular endurance heavily, how could you systematically map out your nutrition and your recovery, especially sleep, to specifically support the dominant stress of whatever training block you're in?
Now that's taking it to the next level. Think about the fuel. Strength work demands rapid energy creatine, ATP, whereas hypertrophy requires steady resources for repair for protein synthesis.
So you'd eat differently.
You should. If you're in a high-volume hypertrophy phase, your caloric and protein demands for repair will be significantly higher than during a pure strength phase, where recovery from neural fatigue might be the limiting factor. And that's often solved best by strategic, deep rest, not just by raw calories. It's about being truly holistic.
Tailoring your recovery based on the training signal. That's the final frontier of customization, isn't it? What we've learned today is that tailoring your workout based on a clear understanding of the differences between strength mechanics and hypertrophy mechanics is the single greatest key to faster, more effective results. Know your goal, apply the right method, and watch what happens. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and in the meantime, let's roar.